Welcome back. This is session 14 of our free online Bartitsu sessions during closed down, lockdown, whatever you want to call it. Today we are back in my back garden, which is not lovely and sunny like it was last week, where I almost died of dehydration, and today I am being rained on. So we're hoping very much that over the next hour it continues to lightly drizzle and not just turn into a full-scale downpour. So fingers crossed on that one. It would be really appreciated if any of you who are owed any favours by any deities, now is the time to pray for at least an hour of not torrential downpour. Mostly because I think Troy here would take about a week to actually dry out, because he is entirely made of nice absorbent materials. Anyway, let's not dwell on that. Instead, let's focus on what we're here to talk about, which is this week we're going to be looking at two more improvised weapons as we cover that part of our syllabus. So today we're going to be looking at the club, which I will be using this as screamer stick here to represent, but really anything will work for that. And the other one is the coat, for which I'm going to be using a hoodie, which I am currently wearing. So you get a striptease halfway through. Okay, just take my hoodie off. But anyway, that's where we are. We've done quite a few sessions on improvised weapons already, so hopefully the format's starting to become a little bit more familiar with you. A lot of the techniques we're going to cover are going to be kind of familiar with you as well. So if I gloss over some of the easy ones and you're like, that was fast, it means I've probably looked at it in a previous video. Go back and have a look. Some of the stuff tonight we're going to be covering has been covered in Cane, has been covered in Saber, has been covered in a run through of different weapons you do. There's a whole load of stuff that's there, and will be there for you to go back and view it anytime you want. So feel free to go and pick up any of that. So let's start off, as we do every week, with falling in. So attention and fall in. Okay, so tonight we're going to start off by looking at the short inflexible. Okay, so this is what I'm holding here. It is short and it is inflexible. By short, I mean that it doesn't have the range to take it really out of striking distance. Okay, so if I'm using this at full strike, the other person can quite happily be using their hands and their feet and still be in really the same distance as me. Okay, this is probably a little long, but anything where you've got maybe a foot and a half coming out the end of your hand is really in that kind of range. So whether we're looking at knives or kosh, which we looked at last week, the kind of short, flexible weapons, really don't change that distance. So it's short. Okay, that's the first thing we have to be aware about it. It's also non-flexible. Okay, what that means is it's really good for stopping things coming in. It's really good at parrying, and it's really good at striking. And we've also got thrusts in play. Okay, you can't thrust with a flexible weapon. It doesn't work. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with. Boxing range. Okay, we can block with it, we can strike with it, we can thrust with it. That's what we really need to be aware of. Now, the material we take our baton or short inflexible training from actually is actually I think the version we have is an FBI reprint of the New York Police reprint of the original training manual that was used by the New York Police. But basically we base it on police baton, and the reason for that is that we look at it from a self-defense point of view. Now, clearly I've got a screamer stick. You'll admit, come as a shock to you, I've done a screamer in my past. But a lot of that, you're trying to kill people. There's no getting away from that. It is a wartime art. You're breaking skulls, you're breaking bones, and you're trying to cripple your opponent. That's not good for self-defense. So instead, what we want to be looking at is something where it's used much more to defend ourselves and control our opponent. Okay? So for that, we're going to look to the police. Now, I know this gets a little contentious right now, but whether you're aware of it or not, you know, present media aside, the police are meant to protect people and not kill them. Let's just gloss over the whole political issue around that at the minute. But what it means is their manuals are designed to teach you how to use this to defend yourself, not kill people. So that's what we're taking our basis for. So with that in mind, I'm going to leave out, if you look at the manual, normally you would have a hole drilled through here and you'd have a leather thong that came off it that would wrap around your hand, and you'd hold it, really just to help you keep grip. But there are things you can do around wrapping it round, and then it ends up running what they call the short stick down the side of the arm, which is really what leads us into kind of nightstick and modern American police weapons. There's also stuff in there about using the leather thong as handcuffs if you need to. All of that we're not going to do, simply because if you pick up something, it is unlikely to have a nicely positioned holding strap on it, okay? And a screamer stick doesn't have one. A bottle wouldn't have one. A broken bit of pool cue doesn't have one. You pick it up and that's what you have. So let's work with what we actually have. So we have to be aware it's not sharp, okay? And that means we're slightly worried about people grabbing hold of it, okay? So we're going to adopt a stance. What we could do, rather, let's say what we could do. We could use this pretty much the same as Kosh we did last week. I could have this chambered up behind my head into a normal boxing guard, and be looking to get a block in there, expose my opponent, and then use that to strike in at the back of the head. Pull across, strike in, yeah, push up, underneath with a strike. I can use it in that way, okay? If you want to use it in that kind of way, go back and watch what I said on Kosh last week. Go and watch this brilliant short Kosh, kind of semi-flexible one that Tommy does. Go and have a look at his stuff. And you'll pick up exactly how to use it in that way. We're not going to be using it in that way. Instead, we're going to use it front forward. So we're keeping the weapon out in front of us, but rather than pointing it forward, we're keeping it quite back and out the way. We're going to try and discourage people from grabbing that weapon. Because if they grab it, it's then kind of shared between us. There is actually a fair chunk on the manual on how to get it back if that happens, but we're not going to have time to cover that. And again, it's really hard to cover with just one person. So, here's our stance. Exactly the same as pretty much every other stance we use in terms of where my feet go. And my hands, one of them up is in kind of a rear guard for boxing, and the other one is out and forward, so that I'm keeping the club ready and out in front of me, but not presenting it to make it easy for somebody to get. Okay? Now, if we're looking at, where do we start with here? Let's start with some blocks. That seems a sensible way. So from here, if I'm looking at a punch coming in, okay, and let's assume my opponent's right-handed, the punch is going to be coming into my left-hand side here. Now I've got two options. As the punch comes in, I can block straight across, as I would do in some of the cane or in sabre into what, if you're a fencing person, you might think of as fourth. Okay, so I can block across like that, and I'm really looking to catch that inside of the elbow as it comes in. So as the punch comes in, I'm looking to knock it out of the way that way. Okay, and normally, little twist to the body just to give myself a little bit more breathing room as I'm doing this. Likewise, I can go to the other side. Okay, the cane's already there, but I can again push it across to catch on the inside, and that keeps me on control of what we call this inside line. I am between their hands, and I have control of the center line between my nose and my opponent's. Okay, so that's one option. The other option is, when the punch comes in, I can dip the cane a little, catch the outside, and push it across. And by that I mean, when the punch comes in, my cane starts here, dips underneath and catches the outside of the wrist, and pushes it right the way across. Now that is harder to do, but you'll notice how much more it opens me up, okay, to a counter strike coming in here. So this is nice and safe, and you've got these center lines coming in for the head, but we're reluctant to use head strikes if we want to use this defensively. If we go to the other side and push across, it's harder to do, but opens up softer targets in here which we can exploit. So what we'd be looking for there is to drop, circle round and catch, and push across as we step. Likewise on the other side, I'm going to drop, catch, push across as we step. So from here, I've got a little circle, yeah, to catch the outside and turn. Little circle to catch the fist and turn. Okay? So that's really what we're going to be looking at. Inside, outside, so we can cover the inside, we can take them across and do the outsides. If it's coming straight down for us, of course, we have an upwards block. Yeah? Not really going to use that so much for punching. The other one that we're likely to use is if a kick comes up the center line. If it comes in from the side, I've got my strikes here, which again, if you are a fan of something like Sabre, or you've watched the Sabre stuff I've done previously, that would be a defense in what, 2nd, and that would be a defense in 7th or 17. But really, they're just coming from here. I'm swiping those out to the side. I'm less interested with catching and moving the leg across. I just want to really hurt them and stop them kicking me. If it's coming straight up the centre line, I've also got this drop block in the middle, which I can use just to take the sting out of something like a quick front snap, or a chasse frontal as we call it. Boom, down here. So that's me covered below, above, and from the sides with different varieties of parries. Whew, I think I've covered all of that. Right. So, once we've blocked an opponent, we need to strike back, okay? We generally don't strike first with the cane, simply because, again, it comes from a defensive point of view. So what we'd be looking at is something, if somebody punched on, let's keep it on this right-handed side here, I would block, pull them across, and then I've got to pick my target. Normally, as I grab them across, I'd look to control their wrist, and then strike over the top. Now there, my strikes here become at the neck, about here. I can go lower, take the elbow, or if I really want to, I can try and come underneath, but I then need to make sure I've done that before I grab the wrist, and I can come across at the knee. Okay? Neck, elbow, knee. Okay? And those strikes are simply because into the neck, I'm going to do a lot of concussive force. There's like blood vessels and things there. I can cause shock and trauma to the head without actually splitting the skull open. Okay, elbows and knees break easy. And if we can take those out, we can end the fight. Okay, this is still more force than I would normally like to use when I'm using the club in a self-defense purpose. Okay, I mean, if you're in what we do, a randoms weapon tournament where you could just end up with anything and you fight. If I'm fighting somebody with a saber with this, yeah, I'm going to go for head strikes, I'm going to go for arms or whatever is available. But for self-defense, I want to keep it control rather than striking. But you do have those options. If we took it from the other side, come across, we grab, the knee is really handily available there. So come across and I move before, I've got the elbow, move before I grab, I've got the neck. It's also worth saying, there's a technique where when we do our block, we normally come up through the middle and turn the hand. Once you're in this position, you normally find you've got a fist. If you open your hand into what's like almost a crescent type shape, and then sweep that round and across, it's really easy to turn that into a grab. So if the punches come out and I've blocked up and across, I can turn that round and find the hand and turn it into a grab. Okay, so all of those options I have, if I block with the backhand to catch, pull, and then strike, much like I did with the kosh, okay? That covers really the basic how to use it as a club side of things. What I want to look at is the interesting tricks that the police department put in to make it a more, or rather a less lethal weapon. That's a better way of putting it. So, these really fall into categories. There's the move along and the come along techniques. The difference being a move along technique is don't be here and go vaguely over there, which is of course useful. Whereas the come along is the in a controlled fashion, you are going exactly where I want you to, along with me. Okay? So one is for just get out of the way, and the other one is for I am taking control of the entire situation. Now the reason the move-alongs are in there is largely due to, as they put it, dealing with those who have had one too many. Okay? So these are your drunks, your down and outs, you just rather than actually bother taking them to jail or are worried that they're going to attack you back. However, there was a lot of organised crime as well, so the come-along techniques rather than the move-along techniques are much more for criminal use. So let's have a look at a few of these. So where should we start? So I'm trying to refer to my notes to make sure I get them in the right order. I've already missed some things, so I'm going to come back to that later. The first one I can't really demonstrate. Troy's out here so I can demonstrate some of them, but I can't really demonstrate this one. This is the between the... And the way this works is I will approach the person I want to move away from behind, and one hand lands solidly on the shoulder and gets a grip. The other hand goes between the legs. So the cane is between the legs. From there, I can either twist the cane up and kind of move them away that way. It's surprising how compliant somebody becomes when you threaten their genitals. The other option is to essentially just lift the forward hand and push and shove them where they need to be. So if this is going to be really hard to do to myself, but if the cane comes through the legs there, if it lifts here, I move where it's moving me to. Okay, the other option is to back. This is harder to do, kind of in this way, and then I can be moved and between I've ever had to do. But that is the kind of the between the legs come along. So move along. The other move alongs are, I think, probably more useful because you can do them as part of a sequence of moves. That one you really need to have the drop on somebody. Very hard to get behind somebody and get the cane through somebody's legs when they're actually resisting and fighting you. So what's the next one we're going to look at is the a very traditional one, which is between the neck and the small of the back. And by this I mean, if I turn Troy around a second, if I grab the shoulder, as I said before, and this time rather than trying to go, sorry, it's got mud on it, between the legs, which clearly I can't really demonstrate very well, this time I'm putting the cane in the small of the back, okay? Just kind of to the side of the spine. So my spine's about there, so I'm looking just to the side and in the small of the back. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling the top half of the body backwards and pushing the bottom half of the body kind of out, so that you have to arch up like this. Grab, push. So I'm just kind of grabbing and then pushing on this low line. From there, I can move somebody. I don't have a great control over where they're going to go. They're going to go that way. But if that all I want to do is move them, that's fine. Grab, come on, move, 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 move. I don't really care where you're going, just don't be here. Okay, so that's your move along technique number 2. Move along technique number 3 is probably my favourite. So for this one, what I'm looking for is a situation where I have blocked already. So I have control of a hand. From there, sorry, I'm just trying to move this to somewhere you can see. So I have control of a hand. I have blocked and grabbed. I now have one hand. From there, I'm either going to put the cane. Actually, it works better if I'm on the other side, let's be honest. Just for demonstration purposes. So from here, if I've grabbed, the cane can either go into the kidneys, at which point I'm going to push and pull at the same time. I can also do this on the armpit. If I can get the cane baton up into the armpit, I pull the arm and push on the armpit. Again, very hard to demonstrate without a partner. You're just going to have to forgive me for that, I'm afraid. So what we're looking for is, this works very well off one of those kind of blocks across we've talked about. Grab the hand, step, and then I'm looking for either the kidneys and move them over that way, or the armpit and up. And as long as I'm pulling the body towards me, they can't escape from the prodding either in the kidneys, which is sensitive, or under the armpit, which is sensitive, and that makes them move that way. So I grab, so yeah, block it across, grab, and then either kidneys or armpit and move them across that way. So those are your kind of move along techniques, okay? Which can be useful in terms of crowd control, which is obviously useful to the police. It's also useful to us because if you can grab somebody and move them over there, either they're no longer a problem because there's something over there, which is why you've moved them there, like, I don't know, a police officer who can actually arrest them. If you're in a huge brawl situation, I hope you never are, they become somebody else's problem and you can deal with the next person. Now, if you're in a more criminal situation where somebody's actually trying to hurt you and you need to restrain rather than just move, then you have to look at your come along techniques. And there's really just 2 of those I'm going to cover today, just so that you kind of get a feel for them, but there's quite a few of them. The first of them is the most complicated, and it really is essentially getting a figure 4 arm lock on somebody using the cane. So what I'm looking for here is, again, I've got to get hold of the hand to start with. Once I have control of the hand, I'm going to use the baton into the elbow, inside of the elbow, with my hand high. From there I can step around, move my hand over the top of both and under his arm, under his arm here. So I'm trapping his arm, basically his wrist between my wrists. From there, if I twist the cane upwards, the cane goes into the elbow, as you can see. And at the minute, he can just move that out. But if I've trapped down the options where he can move that arm, I now have complete control over that arm. And if I twist my body this way, it's very difficult for him to reach me with this hand, which would be the bit I'm worried with. So here, I have complete control over that arm. I've locked up this shoulder, and I can drag him around as I need to in this essentially figure 4 arm lock. If I actually push that a little further and get my fingers on my own forearm, then we literally do have a figure 4 arm lock there. Okay? And I can move him around quite happily and keep myself relatively safe. Okay, it's a little bit more tricky to do, especially on a resisting opponent, but it gives you a very secure hold where you can be very safe and you can move somebody around, or indeed just keep them stationary in a way they can't hurt you or anybody else until help arrives. The other one I like a bit more. It's quicker to get. I've seen it used in cane, but I tend to find that the length of the cane makes it difficult to use. But with the baton, it works perfectly. And that's where we can get to the side. We can get this block again. The hand this time comes underneath the forearm and behind the neck. Then I twist, so I'm pressing on the back of the neck and underneath the armpit. And at that point, I have quite a huge amount of control. As long as I keep this arm pulled so they can't escape, I've got control again of a shoulder. And if I've got full control of a shoulder, I can move them around. Okay, and again, it's not as simple as the other one in terms of once they're in the position, I can hold them and stay out of trouble. Because essentially, if they stumble forwards, they can get their head out. So once you've grabbed the arm, come underneath and got it here, as they move, you have to go with them, which leads to you kind of moving around in circles. But what you tend to do at that point is move downwards in your circle. They eventually fall over onto the floor, and once they're on the floor, they're in a much more controllable position. You can move into one of the many standing locks that you use in jiu-jitsu or judo. Once you've got them there, arm locks, straight arm, bent arm locks. I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but all of those kind of techniques you've got then once they're on the floor. So it's a good way of controlling somebody, especially if they're a bit drunk. You can stumble them around. If they are intent on getting away, you can take them to the ground in a position where you're definitely still standing. There's no chance of a sacrifice throw here, and you can take control of them until, again, help arrives. So, those are some of the techniques that you can use just with a straight cane, okay? So you can use it for all of your battering, your thrusts. You can use it in that way. And again, if you've got multiple opponents or if your opponent's armed, those become much more viable techniques. If they're not, you've got these softer techniques of grabbing and controlling and moving people around. Catching, getting round through into your figure 4 arm lock here to move people away. You've got those techniques that are available to you to control the situation and try and de-escalate it and bring it to an end without the use of force rather than just bludgeoning. Now, as I said, one of the problems of this is it can be grabbed. So if you're in a situation where there's multiple people, the risk of this being taken out of play really starts to weigh on you heavily. So you've got to stop that happening. And that's when we move from what we call the single handstands to the double handstands. And it's not a huge shock to know that that's where you bring your other hand in. So it's almost like if you imagine a menacing kind of gesture, all I'm doing is closing my fist around it. Now I've got my cane in this position here, and I can still use this relatively effectively. It's not as long range anymore because I need to keep both hands on it, but I can still strike with it and parry with it. My parries are still here. Yeah, I can still defend quite happily with that. I can even do my scoop and crossing that we were looking at before. If I'm coming to strike though, if I come in with what would be a normal strike, that is too much, too slow. My hand is stopping this working. So what I do is I swing that forward, I temporarily bring my hands together, and then as I bring it back, it goes back up. So I can still get quite a nice little whipping motion of a strike from there. And likewise, if I bring the other side across, I can slip my hand through and back again. So when I'm holding it close, I've got two hands on it. When I'm holding it, when it's further away, those two hands have come together. So from here, okay, and back in again. So I've still got my range, but I have much more control over this. And most of the techniques they have for regaining the cane once it's been, the baton once it's been seized, come from this two-handed position, because that's where they'd expect you to be if you were in a multiple-person fight. Obviously, the other advantage is you've got some really strong jabbing techniques when you've got both hands on it. So, that concludes your very, very quick overview of baton as a weapon. Hopefully you'll see it works very, very differently to cane. Although cane's only maybe 2 foot longer, the way you use it is entirely different. If I start trying to use this as like Vignay cane, it's so short I'm just not going to be effective. Okay? If I start trying to use this as, you know, shillelagh or something, again, it's just not going to work. And it's certainly not long enough to lean on if I want to start looking at Cunningham. But I can still use this very effectively as long as I know what I'm doing. So, that is your introduction to baton. Hopefully it makes some degree of sense. So, how am I doing on time? Oh, wow.
26 minutes.
I'm about halfway through already. Wow. Okay, fair enough. Right, okay. I know there's a lot to cover there, but as I said, I'm not covering a lot on the striking and stuff. It was more the few grapples and things that I think are worth looking at. So, let's move on and have a chat. Since I've been very heavy on the self-defense today, I thought I would continue with that theme. And I'm actually going to steal something that I heard at a seminar. This was... when was this? It was a Bartitsucon. I think it was last year rather than the year before. But anyway, James Marwood is a very good instructor. There's an interview with him. Tommy's been doing interviews with people who practice Bartitsu around the UK. If you haven't seen them yet, go listen to them. They're really good. But one of them he does is with James. James is a very gifted instructor, very good at instruction as well as being very good at martial arts. But the way he describes things is everybody grows up with the fire triangle. Yeah? Everybody's aware of this. So there's a triangle that basically you need to have an ignition source, oxygen, and a fuel source. And if you take away any one of these, then the fire doesn't happen. It's something along those kind of lines. As a ex-chemistry teacher, I should know that off the top of my head. But I think it's those three things. But what James was saying is there's a similar thing that exists when you're looking at self-defense. Okay? Now, when we looked at self-defense, and I was talking about more the legality of it, and we talked about, you know, don't get in a fight to start with. Run away if you can. If you can't, use enough force to be able to run away, and if that's not possible, use enough force to end the fight with minimal damage. Okay, that was our kind of timeline of a fight. This is really focusing on that first one. Don't let the fight happen to start with. And this is what James referred to as the stupid violence triangle. Okay, and it works in the same kind of way. On our first side, we have stupid places. On the next side, we have stupid people. And on the other side, we have stupid things. Okay? And you need all of these to come together in order for a fight to break out. Most of the time. You need to have stupid people doing something stupid in a stupid place. Okay? If you have stupid people doing something stupid in quite a nice place, you're going to annoy a lot of people, but you're probably not going to end up in a fight. Likewise, if you are with stupid people in a stupid place, but you all sit quite quietly and just have a nice pint, you're unlikely to end up in a fight. Okay? So knowing what these things are, you can look to remove one of those options to drastically decrease the chance of a fight breaking out. And if you look at pretty much all of the self-defense advice you're given, it falls into one of these categories. So, for example, there are standard ones like don't go to somewhere you know there's likely to be fights. Okay, in Newcastle, that used to be a place called the Big Market. It's a totally different place now, but if you go back like 15 years or so, that is your stupid place. Fights happen there every Friday or Saturday night. If you go there on a Friday or Saturday night, don't be surprised if there's a fight. Okay, don't go to that place. Okay, what else do I have under stupid places? Stupid places, yeah, don't go to the trouble spots. The standard one you get, stay in well-lit areas. Don't go into dark places where you can't see who's around you. People can sneak up on you easily. Stay in well-populated areas. A mugger is not going to try and mug you in the middle of the high street with 100 other people around you. but they will do it if you're on your own in a dark alleyway. So don't go into those places. Stupid places, what else did I have? Yeah, you can just remove the place entirely. That's where the second step comes in, which is you're running away. Yeah, if you are in a stupid place and things get bad, get away from that place. And that's where your runaway tactic comes in. Okay, so that's your stupid places. We can remove that. Stupid people. Okay, first of all, if you have a mate who is prone to getting into fights, and I had a guy, let's not call him a friend, a guy I knew who was like, yeah, it just seems like, I don't know why, but every couple of weeks I end up in a fight. And I'm like, well, the common denominator here is you. So maybe you're not somebody I want to go out for a casual drink with, because there's a good chance I'm going to end up in a fight. You are someone I'm going to meet quietly in a coffee shop in the middle of the day, not have an all-night bender with. So you know your friends. You know the people that are likely to lead you into bad places. Don't go out drinking with those people. What else am I going to say? Yeah. Also, if you are out, you can spot the people that are gearing up for a fight. Okay? Whether they're drunk or they're loud or they're hyped up. If people are like that, move away from them. Now, in a perfect world, you're Superman. As soon as a fight breaks out, you can save everybody. You can save the world, take out an entire city's worth of bad people in one night and lock them all up. Reality doesn't work like that. Okay? First of all, you've got to look after yourself. Okay? And I know it sounds mean, but if people are out looking for a victim, your first step has to be not to be the victim. Okay? Move away. Let that victim be somebody else. Okay? I know that's harsh, but you can't help anybody if you're the victim. Okay? If you're really worried about it, move away from them. Call the police. Move away from them. Tell a bouncer. Make people aware that these people are out looking for trouble. Okay? But don't be the trouble. Okay? That doesn't help anybody. The other thing is sometimes the stupid people is actually just you on your own. Okay? You're much more vulnerable when you're on your own. Go with a couple of mates wherever you're going if you can. If there's a couple of you, you're much less likely to get into trouble if there's a group of you than if you're on your own, because if you're with a couple of people, they need to be with a couple of people to actually make it a reasonable threat. So, you know, it just cuts down the chance of that happening. Anyway, there's your stupid people, stupid places, stupid things. Everybody knows stupid things that can get started into a fight. One of the first ones I would say is, it comes under this advice you constantly get about don't make yourself an obvious target. By that I mean, don't flash the bling. Okay? I look at it this way. I drive a pretty beat up car. Okay? And when I drive into work, most of the other people drive really nice cars. That gives me a sense of security, because I know if somebody breaks in to steal a car, mine is not the one they're stealing. They're stealing the Jaguar or the BMW. Okay? So, in the same way, if you go out and you walk in, and the first thing you do when you walk into a dodgy club is buy a bottle of champagne and pay for it with cash, you have been marked as a target, someone who has more money than sense, and they have it on them. Okay? So the more you splash the bling around, the more of a target you make of yourself. So you can still make an impression without having money to be part of it. Okay? What else do we have under stupid people? Don't be aggressive. That is one of the standard ones. It tends to happen. Somebody goes, are you looking at my missus? Okay? That is somebody looking for a fight. Okay? If your response is, oh, I wasn't wearing it, and you're up in their face, that will escalate back and forward until the fight kicks off. Okay? That's your point to, you know, that you need to de-escalate from that situation. Okay? Now, obviously, it's going to depend on different people, but generally, you've got to leave your ego out of this. Okay? And at that point, you just kind of go, yeah, she's really pretty, you're a really lucky guy, can I get you a pint? Okay? Most people are not then going to find it, it's going to find it a lot harder to keep that flow of anger going, okay? And you spent £4, bought a guy a pint, and you haven't ended up in a fight. That's a win. You know, so be aware of stupid things people do, including yourself. Also, don't be deliberately obnoxious. So if you are, you know, okay, Standard example of people doing stupid things, stag night. If you are in stupid costumes, you've been drinking since lunchtime, you're running around causing minor vandalism and acts of breach of the peace all over the city centre. That's kind of normal as long as it's low-key, but it is stupid things, okay? If you are causing people an annoyance, you are making yourself a target again. Anyway, so that was the principle. That's your triangle. Just be aware and think about when you're out or when you're moving around, what are those things? Are there ways that I can easily mitigate the risks of getting in a fight? Okay, it sounds very horribly like when you go to like health and safety talks at work, but it's the same principle. If I can reduce the risks, it's less likely to happen. That's literally what it means. So if you can reduce the chance of being in a fight, you reduce the chances of yourself being hurt in a fight. So that's all part of that. Don't let a fight break out. That sounded very heavy-handed, and I didn't mean it to be, because I am one of the worst people to go out drinking with in terms of not getting into fights. That's not true. Actually, I've never actually been in a fight since I started learning martial arts. That's really weird. I used to get in scraps quite a bit when I was younger, but I think one of the things martial arts does is it gives you the confidence to know you can probably just about come out relatively unharmed. But what that mostly does is it gives you the confidence to actually try and talk in that moment where everything's ramping up. If you are scared at that point, you show more aggression because that is an inbuilt human response. So what you can do at that point is de-escalate and just let people win. I saw a fantastic one was the guy was saying, if he gets challenged to a fight in a bar, instead he goes, tell you what, let's do an arm wrestle instead. Go on, arm wrestle, come on. Let's do it. And ramps them up, but gets their focus away from a fist fight to a completely different macho strength challenge, and then strategically loses. And then they're like, oh, yeah, dude, you're better than I am. That aggression, that need to prove they're the alpha, has been kind of met. Nobody got punched, so it's a win. Anyway, I'm rambling again. I know this is the rambling section, but I shouldn't ramble this much. Let's move on and look at another method of self-defense. So for this one, we're going to be looking at what we call a two-handed flexible. So we had the one-handed flexible, we looked at the kosh, and we looked at the long flexible, which was the belt. We looked at both of those last week, I think. Today, we are looking at the two-handed flexible. In this case, the coat. Now, a lot of this material actually comes from a very early treatises when you actually were looking at cloak. Yeah? So you'd have a rapier or, I can't even remember different terms, but you'd have a weapon of some kind in your hand. Okay? You have a cloak in your other hand, and you can use it defensively. It's not great, but it's better than an empty hand. Okay? It's also, you get the term things like cloak and dagger. It's a great way of disguising what you're doing, so cloak and dagger were used as a combat style together. I know there's other ways that if you want to look into the etymology of that one, that's a whole nightmare. I'll leave you to Google that one on your own time. But what we're looking at here is a coat. It could be a sweater, a leather jacket, if you are prone to LARPing or steampunk, if it happens to be a full tweed cape, then you can use that, okay? The principle is, though, it comes with two nice handy holds. Where the shoulders are, that's where I want to grab with my hands. Okay, so it's dead easy to work out how I want to hold it. Okay, doesn't matter if it's got a hood, doesn't matter how long it is. I grab the shoulders in my fist here. The stance I then take is actually very similar to if we were looking at shillelagh. Okay, my lead foot is forward, my hands are up in front of me. Part of what this does already, you will see, is obscures my body. Okay, I'm now just a floating head. Okay, that's the vision that I want to give somebody. Because now, if they're going to try and punch my body, they don't really know whether I'm here or whether I'm here. Okay? And that is a huge distance in terms of where a punch gets thrown. Okay? So it makes it much harder for them to confidently attack the body. I now know they're coming at my head. I have limited down their angles of attack that allows me to be better prepared to defend against that. So, how do you defend against the punch with something as useless and wobbly as material? What we're actually going to do is we're going to use the fact that the bit along the back of a coat, I mean, you can see it on this one, there's an extra layer of stitching I can't even remember what this is. My wife's going to be annoyed because she's a seamstress and I should know these things. But this kind of extra level of reinforcement along the back of the neck exists on most coats and things, and we're going to use that. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to keep our hands slightly together rather than fully stretched out. And as we move this, we're going to look at the upwards one to start with. So this would be somebody trying to punch me in the face with a jab. I'm going to snap that forward. So rather than just lifting it up, I'm going to lift it but spread my hands apart. It's really hard. There we go, that's a good angle. So from there, rather than just lift it up, I spring forward so my hands come out. So the idea is at that moment where the reinforced part connects with the wrist, that's when I get the moment where it actually reaches, is snapped straight. Okay? So from here, boom. And what that does is it makes that suddenly very tense, the force moving away from it, and all of that is going to move their fist offline. Okay, which is all you really need to parry. So we have that really nice, quick, straight up. Make sure you get it down again so you can see. Okay, this is not good. I don't know what he's doing. There's no point obscuring my vision. But from here, snap, back down again. I've got that covered. Okay, and the more I throw it forward as I snap, the more distance I'm taking away, the less I need to deflect the angle to actually make it miss me. Okay, that's like basic geometry and stuff. Now I can do this to the side as well. From here, there's nothing to stop me making these snap movements to the side. They're not great, so I would very much encourage that movement of the body when you do it. Okay? So from here, I'm going to move the body in the opposite direction just to buy me a little bit more space. There is also the option that's worth knowing about of that kind of dropping it down that way. I'm not going to advise you use that for a kick. I'm going to advise you use that in one very specific situation, which I'll come to in a minute. But mostly, you're going to be blocking up, because there's no point coming for your body. They're likely to come for your head. You're going to block up. They might come in with hooks. You're going to move out the way, and you're going to take those blocks with the edges here. And that's really the basis of how you're going to use it in terms of defense. The one thing that is really nice about this is that it is flexible. So the minute I have made my contact and done my parry, I can bring my hands back together again, and this is now a piece of string between my hands. So what I can look at, if somebody did do a low punch, I can do that block down and then wrap that around their hand. Okay? So I can actually use this rope to then bind their wrist and take control of that hand. Okay? So if I can get it over the top here, I can get it round and control that arm. Once I've got that, I have the hand, I can start looking to get kind of elbow to elbow and take control. I can even look to step in and start striking. I have those kind of options because then I'm controlling their main attacking limb. If you are using a relatively heavy coat and they are carrying a small knife, this also works really well because you can grab and smother that knife and control it, and that's the thing that's dangerous. Okay, I don't want to go too much into knife defense because you have to do a lot of knife defense to really be any good at it, but I'm just going to mention it now. You have that option, drop over the top, smother and control, and take control of that limb. Now of course you can do that out to the side as well. Once I've got here, I have to loop that whole hand round above. It's not great. You end up having to do these kind of weirder sideways parries here. So rather than a strong over the top, you're doing a slightly weaker parry out to the side. But it does then allow you to do that wrapping action. Okay? So you have those options. Even going up, wrapping over the top is really difficult. Okay? So I wouldn't advise it if you're going up, but if you're going down, wrap. If you think that the attack isn't going to be particularly strong, feel free to go near side hand up rather than near hand side down. It's a weaker block, but it gives you that option of the wrap. Okay. The other thing we have is this whole traily bit down the bottom. So we can use that to our advantage as well. And the first one is just a quick flick up in front of you. That. And literally, it's like shaking out a bed sheet. Yeah, I move it forward. As I pull it back, the other end flicks up. Okay, so it's like, you know, if you're trying to get of the, what am I thinking of? The duvet cover. When you're trying to get the duvet and the duvet cover and you shake it to try and get it all in the right place. It's the same technique. And the idea is I'm trying to flick this into my opponent's eyes. Just temporarily confuse where they're going. From there, I'm going to use that normally as a cover. Either they're coming in at me and I'm going to disturb the equilibrium. They're coming in to strike, suddenly they can't see, they might back out. You know, you're taking away their confidence that what they're doing is working. And that is, anything that does that is good for you. You can also use it to cover your own attack. So I can flick and quite happily then come in with a kick. Or even a flick, let go with one hand and come in with a cross. So it allows me to cover what I'm doing and get in. It allows me to confuse them. And also, you know, it just keeps people a bit worried that there's this flicky thing going on all over the place. So that's the flick up. There is a flick left and a flick right that I quite like as well. So from here, this hand is going to stay where it is, and that hand moves, and you get this lovely swirl effect right the way over the top. Now that in and of itself isn't great. This is not going to be normally heavy enough for you to deflect something. The reason this works with rapier is that rapier is quite long and you're attacking the very point of something, and leverage is on your side and you have a heavy cloak. I'm using a cheap hoodie and I'm going against a fist with no leverage. It's not going to parry something. But it can, again, give me a distraction and line me up for an attack. So what I can do is take my swoosh across, and from here you can see my hand is ready to let go of this and come into a back fist directly at them from the top here. Now, because my hand is open here, I need to open it to let go. There's quite often I will fall back on my reverse BAF, LeBoff from Savat. Rather than closing it into a kind of traditional hammer fist, I'll leave it open and go for that strike to the side of the neck with the reverse LeBoff. In the same way, I can go over the top and then come through with the cross over the top. Or again, if my hand is open, there's nothing to stop that being a musette. Or a rising musette, or whatever you want from there. So you can distract and then come in with another technique. And of course that works to both sides. I can go this way as well. So I can come over here and then step in with my LeBoff. Or swipe across here and come in with my musette. So, a little bit of cloak there. Mostly for distraction and confusing. There are a few other things that it's worth mentioning. I'm just checking that I haven't missed anything when I've been going through this. No, we're all good. You also have, of course, the coat throw. Okay? Which is literally, and this isn't too complicated, you throw the coat. But don't lob it like a ball. What I'm trying to do is throw it over them. So if you imagine you had, I'm trying to think of a real life situation where you do this, but essentially what I'm trying to do, if you imagine your old-fashioned coat stand, I'm trying to throw it so it lands on the coat stand, rather than just throwing it in the general direction. So ideally I want it to land over the top. And the more over the top I can get, this is a second to dislodge. This is a couple of seconds of actually getting it off the top of my head. And that's all time I can either be getting in and finishing the fight, or I can be pegging it in the opposite direction. So that is an option. You can throw it. But try and get good solid head coverage when you do. And bear in mind it's a one-shot deal. Once I have thrown this, I no longer have it. I know that seems really obvious, but in the heat of battle you go, oh, this is a great tactic. Oh, now I'm unarmed and he's still got something. That wasn't a wise choice. Okay, so you've got to be certain when you use it, but it is the option. You've got your throw. The other thing is we can go to using it one-handed. Okay, and this takes it much more back to cloak. And really the only technique I'm going to look at again, because we can't use a lot of the cloak techniques for the reasons I explained a few minutes ago. We can do the offhand figure of 8. Okay, so I'm going to let go at this point simply with my right hand, and I'm now holding it by one shoulder. From here, I'm going to swing this in a figure of 8. Okay, and it'll open up a little bit, but this is not dangerous. But what this is an area that I'm marking out between me and them. They have to move through, okay? And for some people, that's enough of a barrier to make them think twice. And if they do crash into it, you have the option of then trying to get it in their face. You've got the option of dropping back grab, slide along that until you find the other shoulder, and I'm back, okay? So I can have my figure of 8, I catch my own hand, slide, I've got the shoulder again, and I can start using this defensively on the other side again. The other thing this does is it makes it very hard for them to tell what I'm about to do, because at least temporarily this is in front of their face, and then I'm going to come in with something. Normally I like to use this with a low attack, so from here I might even come in fouetty around the side, but it also works very well with hiding when that punch is coming through, okay? The other thing that means is that your other hand is free. So if, for example, you've got your half-broken pool cue at the same time, now I'm going to move this back like a kosh, and I'm going to open up this area in front of me, and I can use that to distract from the point where I come in with the club. Or I can hold it low and back, so that this time I'm going to swing my coat a little lower, but what I'm looking for is disguising the point when the thrust is going to come out there. Now that is moving very much into something that feels like HEMA, more sword-based, but it's something that you have available and you should know that it is in your arsenal. So, coat. Very much make sure you learn that snapping technique, and don't just do it a few times and think you've got it, okay? If you want to learn to use coat, you have to get somebody to put on a pair of gloves and try and punch you, and you have to be able to stop them repeatedly before you can actually claim you know what this technique is. From there, you've got your flicks, your parries, okay, the wraps, the throw, okay? They're all useful techniques that can all help you stay alive, and much like things like belt, nobody is going to take a hoodie off you or a coat if you're out in a pub, in a club, whatever, a situation where a fight's likely to start. There's a good chance you will be wearing something that you can use defensively. So you might as well learn how to use it, if that is something you are concerned about. So that covers, I think, mostly everything I wanted to look at this week. We've had a look at the club, the short, inflexible, using it like a police baton, using it much more for control of our opponent rather than just brute force bludgeoning, although that's always an option. We've looked at the coat, how to defend with that, how to distract with that. I've just touched on the idea of potentially using things in different hands, but that requires a bit more skill and coordination than most people will be interested in for self-defense. So that kind of takes us to the end of this, which is, I think, our 14th session. And we can look forward to next week. Next week we will be looking at essentially the last two classes of improvised weapons that we actually look at. One of them we'll be looking at is the two-handed inflexible. So for this case we're thinking something like a pull cue. Randomly, does anybody remember the kind of like poles with a little hook on the top you used to close windows with in like the school hall? That would be a two-handed, anything that is long, you need both hands to actually move it around. It becomes something a bit more quarterstaffy, although we're going to use it a lot more like spear or a lot more like bayonet. The weapon I'm going to be using next week is a pull cue, because that fits very well into this category. So we're going to be looking at pull cue. The other thing we're going to be looking at is the incidental weapons, and what I mean by this are weapons which aren't going to do any real damage, okay? These are weapons to distract people, or weapons of distraction. They are ways to temporarily confuse or disorientate our opponent to allow us to get something else. So this covers hats, handkerchiefs with a coin tied in the corner, a handful of pocket change, anything you've got. There's a wonderful video online, I cannot remember who did it, but it's a guy who trained military people in self-defense. And he has something where three guys come into a room. He's had a restaurant with his girlfriend, I assume, and literally he is trained to escape, and that's what he's trying to show them. And literally he just starts picking up everything and throwing it. Yeah, plates, cutlery, everything gets thrown at them, and it's really giving these guys a real barrage of stuff to get through to get to him whilst he's making his escape. So those kind of incidental weapons can really make a difference. So we'll be looking at those next week as well. Beyond that, when we've done session 15, we're on to session 16, and I'm really starting to struggle for ideas of what I can teach you that doesn't require a second person or a partner to really be able to explain it. There's a few things I'm looking at. I'm quite likely to do a session on straight razor, not because I think it's a good self-defense weapon, because it isn't. It's interesting from a historical point of view, so those of you of a more humoury and scholarly aspect might find that quite interesting, although from a self-defense point it's less interesting. But other than that, I'm going to be searching around for more stuff to teach. If there's anybody out there who wants to know about specific things that are kind of Bartitsu related or in the field of Bartitsu, let me know and I can have a look at trying to cover those. Because a lot of this improvised weaponry stuff I wasn't going to cover, and I've only covered because people asked to see it, particularly the inflexible weapon stuff we did last week. So if you do have any ideas, let me know. If you have any questions, let me know. As usual, drop them in the comments, I'll pick them up from there, or message me. I will always talk about martial arts and Bartitsu until even I am bored of hearing the sound of my own voice. So, that takes us to the end of this week. We'll be back next week. Until then, I'm sure it's going to be another crazy week with everything that's still going on. I still don't know when we're going to be opening face-to-face again. It certainly doesn't look like it's going to be anytime soon. Certainly at least another month. So, we're going to be here for a bit longer. So I will see you hopefully next week. We'll be looking at more fun and interesting ways to defend yourself. Until then, keep yourself safe. And above all, be kind to your fellow man. It's a weird place out there, okay? Take care. I'll see you all next week.